Okay. So good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening for our community town hall. I want to take a moment before we begin to introduce the cabinet as well as members of the board that are here with us today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Alexandra Estrella, the superintendent of Norwalk Public Schools.
Good evening, Howard White.
Marianne Shepard, Executive Director of Leadership Development.
Ralph Helms, EC, Assistant Superintendent, Digital Learning and Innovation.
Sandra Fayoes, Deputy Superintendent.
Mary Ellen Flaherty-Ludwig, Board Member.
I'm Diana Carpio, Board Chair.
Lunda Asmani, Chief Financial Officer.
Rob Pennington, Assistant Superintendent of Schools.
Jasmine Prezi, Board Member.
Ashley Golias, Board Member.
So this evening presents a beautiful opportunity for us to, one, have conversations with the community at large, to, one, understand what are some of the priorities that members of the community have as we start planning the operating budget for the 2026-27 academic school year. The last budget cycle, we had the opportunity, one, to listen to the community and to learn. I feel every budget cycle gives us an opportunity to better understand what are the needs and wants of the community and then utilize that information to make informed decisions around prioritizing our fiscal responsibilities and the budget. Obviously, the last budget cycle allowed us to learn a lot from the community in terms of the things that the community wanted. We had successes and we had pitfalls, and from those pitfalls, we are hoping that some of the shifts that we're making help us better inform the work that we do moving forward. This is the second year that we host town halls to have conversations with the public before we put together the operating and capital budget. So we're hoping today, like we did last year, to gather information that will inform the work that we do moving forward. One thing that we did differently this year, based on what we learned from the prior years, that we had the families engage in a survey, just providing us some context, and you'll learn more from our CFO around the findings of that survey that kind of set the tone for our conversation this evening. I just want to talk a little bit before we go into the presentation about just the rules of engagement for this evening. So we'll start off with a brief presentation, providing an overview of the budget. And once we engage in that process, we're going to participate in a Q&A session. In order to, one, allow equity of voice and facilitate the dialogue, we have members of the communication team that will be, oh, sorry. I need the next one. Can you, yeah, there. We have members of the communications team that will have index cards where, as the presentation is occurring, you can jot down questions that you would like for us to respond to as we immerse in the dialogue. We're using the index card similar to what we've done in other town halls because we want to make sure that we allow for equity of voice across the conversation. And also for us to collect the questions and later place them in our budget website, the component of our website that has all of our budget documents. And if we don't have enough time to respond to all of the questions, then it gives us an opportunity to respond to those questions and then upload them on our district website. So at this point, I want to turn it over to Mr. Asmani. Before Mr. Asmani begins, we also have another member of our board that has joined us today, Sherry McCready Pritchett. Thank you for joining us.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending and for being here. What I wanted to do is, as the superintendent mentioned, we did engage in a community survey throughout the month of October and parts of November. So what I will also share after I give a brief overview of the budget are what we heard from the members of the community regarding the budget and priorities, and we will use that to inform us as we put the budget together. But first off, to begin with, is this is the current budget that we have for this school year, FY25-26. If you follow the budget last year, you'll know that the initial budget that was approved for the Board of Ed was about 242.7 million. There were some subsequent conversations that happened after that budget was approved, and the city allocated or appropriated an additional 6.5 million to the Board of Education. 2 of that million went towards our health insurance account, and 4.5 million went to the Board of Ed operating budget. And so as you can see, after the budget was approved, there was a $4.5 million appropriation. That amount was used to reinstate about 53 positions in the district. It all went into the school's budget. And so you can see that 4.5 million, 3.5 million was towards salaries, about 890,000 was benefits, and the outlier 20,000 that actually went to Brian McMahon. Brian McMahon has a program that they partner with kids in crisis, and they were short 20,000 in the budget, and so we appropriated of that 4.5 million. $20,000 went to that program that's managed through Brian McMahon. So that's the 4.5 million that you see there. And so if you add the original budget plus the 4.5 million, you have what we refer to as the amended budget, which was 247.2 million. So that is the budget that we have for this year, which does reflect a 5.9% increase over what was approved the year before. So the original appropriation was 4%. The 4.5 million was another 1.9% for a combined 5.9% budget for this fiscal year. Our student enrollment fluctuates throughout the year. There's some seasonal variations, but this is a snapshot of our enrollment that we took on the 1st of June as we were closing out the year. So in terms of students, we had a little over 11,600 students throughout our 21 schools. We had a little over 2,000 employees district-wide. At the end of the year, we had brought in 80 new employees into the district. In terms of K through 12 students, we added just about 1,300 new students. And last year, we had 26 of our students graduate high school with an associate's degree from the public school system. Our district is very diverse. We speak 51 languages at home, and you can see the number of schools that we have. But this is just a snapshot. The official count from that we give to the state of our enrollment is typically on October 1, not typically, statutorily is October 1, and that would fluctuate slightly from these. But we take student counts at the 1st of every month, and this is just a snapshot of where we were at that particular point. How does our budget come together? We have is this Google Sheets? Did you change the format? Is this a PowerPoint? Okay. Oh, okay. I'm sorry, the text has cut off a little bit from the original version, so I apologize for that. The format, and it may be off on the subsequent slides as well. So this is kind of how our budget comes together. It's a cyclical budget. We typically begin our budget in September and October. We refer to it as the pro forma budget. This is when we start getting information from our students, from our teachers, and from our staff members who we have in the district. So we take a baseline amount. We know what our contributions are to our benefits. We know what our salaries are. So we begin building our budget with that information. With that information then, which is where we are now in November, we begin asking our department heads to provide us information, programmatic information that's going to be influenced in the budget. So as an example, we know, for example, at South Norwalk School, we are adding a fourth grade this year. So from a programmatic standpoint, the staffing role that we produce in September will be adjusted because we have to take into account the additional staff people that we have to accommodate for the fourth grade students that are coming in next year. After that process, we begin working with the superintendent, and the superintendent presents the superintendent's recommended budget in December and January. That gets approved by the board and then is then submitted to the city. And then we join the city budget process where our Board of Ed budget, together with all the other city departments, police, fire, recreation and parks, and all of those are all reviewed together as a total budget of the city. And there are multiple boards on the city side that are involved in this process. Common Council, we present to Finance and Claims, the Board of Estimates and Taxation, and so forth. During the months between January and April, we start developing what we refer to as the student-based budget. This is when we now begin working with our principals, looking at what are the enrollments within their schools, what are the needs of those schools, any staffing changes that take place at the school level. This is when we do that process. During this time also, the city, through various boards, will start making recommendations towards funding levels. And then at this point, we know that perhaps if the request was a certain percentage, the approved amount was a different percentage, then we start working again with the schools and department heads to reconcile those budgets so that those two numbers reconcile together. And then during the month of June, the Board of Ed approves the final reconciled budget. In terms of engagements, during all of those cycles, we do have numerous engagements with the community. And this is an example of one of those. So right now, as part of this initial phase of the budget, we did have our initial engagement back in September. We started presenting preliminary numbers of how we ended the year before to our finance committee on the Board of Ed. We also presented that information to the Board of Ed business meeting in mid-September. On September 24th, the Board of Ed and the city held a joint public hearing, which is a new addition to our charter. And at that point, both the city CFO and myself started sharing how we ended the year and what are things we're looking towards for FY27. In October, we've had a number of business, at every single business meeting, we've provided updates. We also updated our finance committee. We held a workshop, I believe that was last week. Last night, we had our business meeting, and today is this town hall. So as you can see, between the month of September to today, we've had 8 of these budget, what we refer to as budget engagements, and we will keep having them between now and June when the budget is finally approved. In terms of how the budget is developed, all of these cycles, the numbers, as you would expect, do fluctuate. So this is looking at last year's budget cycle, and this year would be similar in terms of those steps. So we began last year with that initial request from the departments. It started at 14%. As you can see, the numbers changed over time. The superintendent and the board approved a 9.7%. As it went through the city budget process, it was mayor recommended 4%, so did the council, and so did the BET. And then, as I mentioned earlier, with that additional $4.5 million appropriation, the budget was amended to that 5.9%, and that is the budget that we have to operate with currently. In terms of historic funding levels, this is just looking at the last 9 years of the budget. You can kind of see what the funding level, the final funding levels have been in each of those years. And you can see in a fiscal year 26, that 5.9% is reflected there. I briefly mentioned that we do engage with our schools. 90%, a little more than 90% of our staff are school-based positions or student-facing positions. And so when we look at a school budget, these are some of the parameters that we take into account to determine how much does a school budget, should a school budget get. So one is obviously student enrollment. We look at how many students are enrolled in that school. That is a factor in developing the budget for a specific school. We look at student demographic and needs of that school, whether we have high needs and all of those types of things. So that helps us determine what those needs are. We also have grants that go directly to schools. Some of those grants are tied to the socioeconomics of that school, like Title I grants. Not all schools get Title I grants, but some schools do. So this is part of that process in identifying and determining the needs of each school and what grants do schools qualify for and what grants some schools do not qualify for. So that's an element of building the school budget. We do have collective bargaining agreements that mandate the sizes of our classrooms, how many teachers per classroom. We have agreements with unions on those parameters. With our paraeducators, there are limits to how many paraeducators in a classroom to support students. That ratio varies, whether the student has special needs. So all of these things we take into account in identifying how much should a school be funded. So we look at all of those things. We know that our student population, as I shared earlier, we do have quite a large MLL population, multilingual learners, and therefore, when we put our budgets together, we take into account the number of multilingual learners in a specific school. So in addition to the baseline funding, we also provide an additional funding depending on your MLL enrollment at your particular school. Some of our schools have specialized programs that we take into account. For example, Brookside has a Montessori program, and so there are criteria and staffing requirements and curriculum needs for a school that has such a program. We have schools that have LEAP programs or special education programs that are in that school. So as we build the school budget, we look at all those individual needs and the individual students at that school to determine the allocation levels at the school level. And then finally, we know that we have students that have specialized needs. Specialized needs required additional resources. And so as we put the budget together, we also look at that enrollment. We work with our assistant superintendent who oversees specialized needs to determine how much, because there's a spectrum of needs within our students. Right now, the spectrum is from 1 to 4, 4 being, I'm probably going to get these reversed, 4 being the highest special needs and 1 being least amount of special needs. And so depending on the number of students you have in your school and where they sit on that 1 to 4 spectrum determines the resources that that school gets. So that's kind of just a brief overview of how the budget is put together and how the budget calendar works on the Board of Ed side. But I did want to follow up, as the superintendent mentioned, we did do a community survey, and I also want to take this opportunity to share what we learned from those that participated in the survey. So we sent out the survey in October. I believe we extended the deadline twice during that period. We heard from 514 families respond to that survey. We had the survey in English and in Spanish. 85% of our families responded to the survey in English. 15% of them responded to the survey in Spanish. As part of that survey, we also wanted to know where their students were in the system. And therefore, based on the feedback we got from the parents, 70% of those who filled the survey had students in elementary schools, 31% had students in middle schools, and about 27% were families with students in high schools. As you can tell, as you can see, the numbers don't add up to 100% because we did have families that have students in multiple levels. A third of the families that completed the survey had their students over multiple levels throughout the district. The areas that we heard from in the survey were, we got a sense of what the budget priorities are. We also got a sense from the families areas that we should invest in. The families also gave us suggestions in terms of cost saving considerations. They provided us grade level feedback, which I'll also share, at least level feedback, whether elementary, middle, or high school. They offered us suggestions for how we can better engage with the families and the community. So those were part of the suggestions. And then we also had a number of open-ended feedback answers within the survey just to get a sense of what our families thinking and not to limit the feedback that they give us. So I think almost 60% of the questions had an element of other, where you could just provide open-ended feedback. And I believe the final question was just tell us anything you'd like to tell us that you think we should know. So I think based on that number, we feel like we got a good cross-section of the community, levels of engagement, and also level of students within our systems. What we got from this is the key priorities that came out of this survey were classroom support was very high in terms of what the parents wanted to see. There was feedback in terms of transparency, to be clear, open in how we communicate about the budget. And so this is one of these examples and what we're striving to do in response to that. We did get good feedback that supports for arts, music, and other enrichment opportunities were key. Our families wanted us to continue to provide those supports. They did want better understanding of how administrative costs are managed. We have costs that are school-based, but we also have costs that are not in the school, but are working in support of the schools, but are not at the school level. So parents indicated they wanted to get a better understanding of what those are. And so as we develop this budget, we will look to address many of these things. There was a lot of support for arts, again, and mental health programs. And we did hear from parents that they did want to have ongoing and inclusive collaboration with families. One of the things that we also heard was to have multilingual reports and information. So not to just focus on English, but to have budgeted documents in Spanish, in Haitian Creole, because like I said, our district is diverse. And so that's an area that we're going to focus on this year as we begin working through the budget process. In terms of more digging down into it, classroom support and staffing was very key. We heard from families that they want additional aides and paraprofessionals to better support learning in the classrooms. We heard from families, many of them felt that teachers are feeling stretched thin, limiting their ability to provide individualized attention to students. And so as we develop this budget, these are things we're going to be addressing. We heard class sizes. Many families support smaller classes to strengthen engagement and more personalized interactions. And then they also told us that they really want us to focus resources more towards the classroom and balancing that with the administrative cost that we currently have. In terms of transparency and communication, families told us that they want to get, arts and enrichment, that's right. They told us that they do value balanced spending, fair funding, and I talked about that briefly when we look at a school, your MLL populations, your non-English speaking populations, and so they told us that that was something they wanted us to continue to do. They do want easy to understand updates on the budget. There was overwhelming support for arts enrichment and mental health. Families see art, music as essential for creativity and as a part of being a well-rounded education. Mental supports really came up top on the list. And then again, protecting some of our enrichment programs. They also provide us specific grade level priorities. And we wanted to disaggregate the data because feedback that we heard last year, even when we have these parent engagement, we heard, for example, from elementary school families, sometimes when I'm in these big groups giving feedback, elementary school needs are different than high school needs. And so the parents have different priorities. So we took this survey as an opportunity to start gathering those information. So for an elementary school standpoint, families really emphasized on strong foundation, focus on classroom aids, early reading and enrichment programs. The class size concerns was really an elementary school issue more so than other levels, which is kind of what you would expect. So that was top of our elementary school students. whole child learning, valuing arts, music, social, emotional, and then additional support staff in the schools to help the teachers and catching up with our class sizes. From the middle schools, we heard the importance of smooth transitions. This was both transitions for students who are entering middle school from elementary school, but also preparing students to exit middle school into high schools. So those transition programs were really high on our middle school parents. Emotional support, and then focusing more on clubs and activities at the middle school level, you would expect from that age group. And so we're excited that we were able to reinstate, for example, middle school sports, which is extremely popular initiative. Our 4 principals really enjoy the challenge when it comes to sports and competing against each other, and so do the students. And so that's something that came up from our middle school parents. On the high school, we heard college and career readiness and preparations and having things that prepare our high school students, expanded opportunities for electives and internships in our high schools, and then also just life and wellness skills. And so the feedback was really helpful to us because, one, it makes sense when you think of the different age groups in these levels and what the kids needs as they go through the system. So with that information, I think I also wanted to share what are some of the things that are shaping this budget that we already know of. I shared at the very beginning, we were fortunate to receive that additional $4.5 million additional appropriation in late June, which allowed us to fund positions. As we are building this budget, our goal is to maintain those positions that were funded by that additional funding. So our base budget will include funding for those positions as part of our request. Special education continues to be a challenge, not just for us in Norwalk, but throughout the state and nationally. There is an increase in students being identified having needs, but then also our providers for the services that we cannot provide in-house, we are seeing increasing rates for those services. Our insurance cost will escalate. Primarily here is at the beginning, during the month of June, as part of the agreement, the board will now begin funding for our liability, auto, and property insurance. This is a new budget item. We had not budgeted for this in previous years. At a point in the past, it was funded by the city. It had accrued some balances over time, but the new arrangement between the city and the board is that they would like the Board of Ed to start funding for this insurance. So in our budget proposal, we are going to include funding for this. It's going to be a driver because it's an expense that we didn't have before. We've had plenty of conversations about school meals. Our intent is to continue to provide those meals this year. There's a cost to that. And so as we build this budget, we will include funding for meals. We do have contractual agreements, so we have to honor our staff salaries and benefits as stipulated in the collective bargaining. As I mentioned, we're excited to have a South Norwalk school opened this school year. That school right now is K-3. Next year, we will be adding the 4th grade classroom, and therefore with that, there's some staffing and resources that will be needed to have a 4th grade at that school. We did receive a grant to expand pre-K. We will have a full day program at Wolf Pit and at the South Norwalk School. It's called the Smart Start Grant. However, the grant does not fully fund the cost of that program. And therefore, we would need to provide some additional local support to complement the grant support that comes with that program. But this is a new grant that came this year. We're excited about it because it has a component of this grant is pre-K for students with special needs. And so this is really important for us to continue to do that. And then we have retirement contributions that are changing this year that we have to honor. And then we have a number of service contracts that are going up. We have transportation as an example. We have 3 major transportation companies that we work with. Each one of those is going up 8% as part of the contract. For us, that's a $12 million line item. And so think 8% of 12 million is a driver that we have no control over. But these are some of the things that are driving the budget this year. And with that, I'll toss it back to Superintendent, but thank you for listening, and we will be happy to answer questions when that time comes.
So thank you, CFO Asmani, for your presentation this evening. Before we continue, I just want to acknowledge some people that are in the room. We have State Representative Tracy Mera joining us today. Thank you for being here. We have Mayor-elect and City Council Member Barbara Smith, Common Council members James Freyer and Ann Winterstand. I hope I said that correctly. So thank you for being with us this evening. We also have members of, believe, 3 of our bargaining groups. We have the NASA President, Dr. Lynn Moore, NFT President, Mary Jordan, and I think the Vice President, Joel Gianderkel, is here with us as well, and NFEP President Hope Wyatt. Thank you for joining us in this conversation this evening. I would like to turn it over to our chair, Diana Carpio, to share a few words before we transition to Q&A.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I want to thank everybody for being here this evening. For months and months, and I should say years, we've always been talking about having community input. And it makes me happy to see that this room is pretty full. And I hope that, the next meeting that we have, that you tell your family and friends and other parents to please, please come out, because your voice is important. Tonight is the night where you get to actually talk and let us know what you think is important for your schools, for your families, and for your children. And at the same time, prioritize those needs that you want to be seen in the budget. I also want to thank the team, because the budget is fluid. It's constantly moving. So they are constantly working on this budget. It's not something that is set in stone, because as things change, repairs, enrollments, anything that comes up, that budget is continually changing and the team is continually working on it. And also I want to thank my colleagues here, because it's not easy being up here, listening, seeing, wanting, and not being able to have everything that we want because the funding is not there. And Dr. Estrella, I want to say thank you for your leadership and your vision, because NPS keeps moving forward even though we have a lot of budgetary constraints. And with that, I look forward to hearing from everybody, and please speak up, write down what you want, and this is the time to do what you've been wanting to do and letting us know what is important to you.
Thank you, Chairperson Carpio. So I know that the members of the communications team are going around with the index cards. Please, if you need a card, just raise your hand and they will make sure to provide you with a card. And Mr. Dua, you can begin.
Thank you. Thank you again, Superintendent. Again, my name is Nick from the Communication Office. Thank you again very much for coming out today. So I know we're definitely set some time here for the Q&A. So one of the first questions that we received, can you explain how going from 233 million budget in 24-25 to 242 million budget in 25-26 lead to elimination of so many positions and an extra 4.5 million allocation allowed the reinstatement of the 52 positions?
Thank you. So there are a number of factors that drive the budget. Primarily, as I mentioned earlier, are our staffing. 85% of the budget are staff, and therefore those are costs that do not change over time. There are also some other costs within the budget, like I mentioned, transportation, utilities, and so if you look at the trajectory of the budget for the past 5 or 6 years, it's consistently been 5%, 6%, 5%, 6%. The challenge that we had last year specifically were twofold or threefold. One was our health insurance went significantly higher than we had anticipated. So that took a big chunk of that budget last year, and that's why we had the challenges that we had last year. Secondly, our special education cost did increase. I believe last year's budget, what we had budgeted for special education was just about 9.5 million. I'm looking at you, Joe. About 9.5 million, and we ended the year with a little over 11.1, $11.2 million of the budget. So those were some of the challenges that compounded with the budget. We are fortunate that with the $4.5 million that we did receive from the city, we were able to reinstate most of those positions that were eliminated last year in the budget. I'm not sure if that's...
Yeah, so there was a follow-up on that, which
Okay.
I think you covered already. But what costs increased so drastically to cause that shortfall? And then you covered that already.
So yeah, so last year primarily were the transportation contract was significantly higher. The drivers were special education, health insurance. Those were the drivers that we had last year that really were a challenge in meeting the budget needs.
And also the fact that many of our we lost sunsetted a lot of our grants. So grants that covered a lot of salaries and other resources sunset. And we were not able to apply for the competitive grants because they were not available. And even right now, we are dealing with the situation where some of the grants that were projected to come at a certain level are not. So many of our federal grants are coming in less than anticipated. And we also lost some of our federal aid that we had had for some time.
Thank you. Following up on that, Mr. Osmani, you had said that the drivers last year was part of it is the health insurance. So the other question is, what is the anticipated increase for health insurance for this year?
Sure. So currently we have two health insurance plans. Back in 2016, I believe, the city and the Board of Ed, up until that point, were self-insured. And we left the self-insurance pool and we went to a fully insured plan. The city and the Board of Ed at the time both transitioned to the state health insurance plan, which many local governments in the state had gone to. About 2-3 years ago, one of our unions transitioned out of that plan and went to a high deductible plan. So now on the Board of Ed side, we have two health insurance plans. We have some of our employees are on the state plan, our teachers are on the Cigna plan, and the Cigna plan is the bigger plan because most of our teachers are there. In terms of where are the rates going, we don't yet know what the Cigna plan, for the past 2 years have been on that plan. We have got those rates rather late. We were on a call today with a state insurance plan. The state plan today announced a 15% increase. It's 14% increase overall. They have what they call a 1% regional adjustments for Fairfield County because our health insurance costs are slightly high. Well, not slightly, they are higher than other parts. So you have the base 14%, Fairfield County an additional 1%. So right now, we're looking at a 15% increase for the state plan for those employees that are on there. For the Cigna plan, we don't yet know, but for the past 2 years that we've been on that plan, each year has been 15%. So conservatively, we're budgeting a 15% increase for both, but the numbers will get refined as we go through the budget process.
Thank you. For fiscal year 27, are you basing your budget projections on the town's historic increases, 3 to 5%, or are you being hopeful and using last year's 5.9%?
We're being hopeful.
So in an effort to plan for the worst, but hopefully for the best, if the presented budget is not fully funded, have you started figuring out how to cut costs by streaming central office, money savings options for professional development, and or identifying programs that support the fewest number of students or that have little impact?
So we've just now started the budget process, as I mentioned on the calendar. We don't yet know what the requests are, but as the requests begin to come in, the month of December is when the superintendent puts together a recommended budget. So once we know what the requests are, then I believe everything is on the table. We never exclude anything from those conversations. But are there any specific things that we've done yet? It's really early in the budget process because we don't yet know what the requests are.
Moving into one of the drivers from last year's, again, what is the food deficit for the upcoming year, and how do you plan on funding the prior year's food services deficits?
Loaded question. So for this year, as you know, we had started participating in the CEP program, the Lunch for All program. We initially, part of the budget savings, we had left that program, but then through the generous contributions of the McCord Foundation and through the city, we were able to reinstate that program, and each of those entities provided $200,000. What we have since found out is there are a number of grants that support the food services program that did not come at the level that we had anticipated. And I believe I shared this last night at the Board of Ed meeting. I don't have the slide here, but if you go to last night's Board of Ed meeting, you'll see a slide. We're estimating a reduction of 800,000, well, 400,000 in grant revenue, but we're also seeing a reduction in our meal counts, initial projections, that's causing a reduction. So for this year, we're seeing about an 800,000 potential loss of revenue on top of what we had budgeted. Last year, we saw a deficit of about 1.1 million within that fund, and our goal for this year is to try and catch up and find any savings we can this year to at least fill the gap from last year. But we've since found out we're going to have a gap this year that we also need to address.
Thank you again. So this question is more clarification on groups, school groups within sort of the budget process. So can you explain what the SGC actually does when it comes to the school budget?
Rob, you want to talk about that piece?
So at the school level, what will end up happening is the principal will share their budget with the SGC and talk through some of their staffing decisions. And part of the role of the SGC is to have a discussion and to advise the principal. Yep.
So there's some recent news report indicating that Norwalk had thereabouts about 200 teachers leave. How will the budget process ensure that this number is not as high in the coming years? And what steps are being taken to retain teachers with the budget?
So Rob, do you want to give context about that number based on the presentation you provided during the workshop?
Sure. The number was 137 teachers. We had roughly 31 retirees, and it comes to about 11% of our staff, certified staff, which is in a range of average for urban districts. I think nationally it's around 9.5%, but that is one of the areas. And then one of the pieces that we've been able to look at, it actually was less last year than previous years. And so it is something that we're constantly working on, is how can we attract staff, but also then retain staff.
Mr. Penning, thank you, Mr. Pennington. So let me follow up with that a little bit. So how do you make sure that the teachers feel some level of job security?
So I think one of the things that we constantly try to do in terms of job security, first and foremost, is to continually support our teachers in doing the work effectively, providing them the professional support that they need to do the work, and continually demonstrate to them that we're constantly advocating to find the resources and funding to continue to sustain the programs that we have across the organization. I know that the challenges fiscally are not just unique to us. I think that this is a national federal the federal government has a lot of challenges that are trickling down to the local level. Yet we keep the work focused on making sure that we are supporting, developing our staff, and constantly looking for creative ways in which we provide them with resources to be able to do the work well. Oh, yeah. And the other thing, we just worked through their contract, and one of the things that we did in order particularly to attract new staff and retain is that we made some adjustments, particularly for new staff, to increase the scale, because one of the challenges that we were having was losing staff to other districts that were paying at a higher rate than we were. And in collaboration with NFT, we've bargained a new contract that we're hoping increases salaries to a place that people are more comfortable and willing to stay, given some of those shifts that are in effect now.
Thank you. So jumping into grants, so how are grant revenues impacted by the federal shutdown? And then second question is, do you anticipate a reduction in any federal and state grants for this next year?
So for the first part, the government shutdown, those grants are released to us and allocated to us in the spring and then over the summer. We will see the impact of the government shutdown in upcoming grants because they run about 6, 9, or 12 months ahead of anything that's happening federally. There were impacts prior to the shutdown. Some of the impacts that are more concrete that we shared around the food services that impacted the allocations to something called the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program, which was through the USDA. The USDA was significantly underfunded. And so then we then became impacted by their underfunding. That was one concrete example. We have right now secured the MSAP grant. That is the grant that currently PTech, PONUS, and Kendall actually receive support on for their project-based learning and their STEM programs. That we have received notice that is secured for this year. But even though that was a 5-year grant, I think now we're in year 3, they will not commit to just say you have it for the entirety of the grant. So it's on a year to year. The other things that have impacted are things like families qualifying for SNAP or SNAP benefits. So families that, when those thresholds change, it changes the number of our eligible families also. And so a lot of those federal changes impact us. I don't think we've yet seen the full impact of the federal shutdown because it just happened. So we're seeing the residual impacts of just what was happening prior to that. And was there a second part to that question, Nick?
Yes. Do you anticipate a reduction in any federal and state grants for this next year? I believe you covered that. Yes.
We do. It's just really challenging to predict. One of the grants that we already know we're not going to get an increase on is our Alliance grant. In previous years, we had gotten a $1 million increase. I think it's been for the last 5 years, Nina. Do I hear you? Okay. So for the last 5 years, we had gotten a $1 million increase year to year. And we had always added that into our allocations when we made our budget requests as an offset. We already know we're not getting that increase next year. So that's already been communicated to us, and we anticipate that there are going to be other of those sorts of communications as the year progresses.
Thank you so much. So can you, somebody just clarify what is driving the enrollment growth?
Just across the district?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, the enrollment actually has been pretty stable, especially now when you think about, and Dr. Estrella, please add, but when you think about what is happening at the federal level again, we will see if we get that boost in January. At one year, we had gotten it in November, but mostly we get it through December and January, which tends to be immigrant families that move into Norwalk. So that is yet to be said. But we haven't seen a significant decline. I think it's been pretty stable over the years. We've seen a small dip over the summer, which we always do because the graduating class moves out. And then we will see students like trickle in through the fall. We usually get a bubble in January. So that remains to be seen. So if there was an inclination that there was an enrollment growth, I don't think that we've demonstrated that. Is there?
No, I think it's cyclical because I think the graph I showed was the June 1 enrollment of 11,6, 11, yeah, today, but at the October 1 enrollment usually is like maybe like 11,4, 11,4, 11,5. So there is cyclical enrollment throughout the year, but the October 1, which is the official enrollment that we submit to the state, that enrollment on that date has been relatively stable over the last couple of years to last October, yes.
Thank you. So moving into special education, so why are special education provider rates rising? The district has built strong programs that meet students where they need to be met. An example of this is Triumph at Nathan Hale. How do we ensure we protect and grow special education programs appropriately in Norwalk Public Schools?
So I think there's a couple different layers to the question. I think that in terms of when we talk staffing, we have currently some vacancies, but in the world of special education, we have to provide services. And so when we do have a vacancy, we will end up contracting with an external provider to be able to support while we're looking to hire staff. And when you're looking at those contracts, those have increased over time. And so the best thing we can do is continue to market and hire our internal staff to bring them into Norwalk Public Schools. I think the second layer is in terms of special ed funding, building programs costs money. And I think, however, that also saves money in the long run. And so we have been able to build some really successful programs in district. And that is something we need to continue to look to do based on the needs of our students. And by doing that, that will keep them in Norwalk Public Schools and will also then save money in the long run as well.
And I think we presented in the past some graphics just demonstrating the cost savings over the scope of a child's life in our school system and how much we save when students continue to be educated within our schools. So every effort that we can make to maintain students in district, we will continue to do that by designing programs. But the cost of special education services, not only when we have to provide services when we have a vacancy, but also outplacement has exponentially increased over the course of the past few years post-pandemic. So it behooves us to continue to build programs in-house so that we can see those cost savings. Our biggest challenge is that special education is an area that is a hard to staff area. So as a result of that we are challenged with finding personnel to fill some of our vacancies. But
No, go ahead.
yeah. So, but we have, like Ms. Fayol said, we have many less students in outplaced programs now, which is saving the city and the district millions of dollars at this point.
And just to add to that, the other element of that is, as Mr. Pennington mentioned, is when you don't have the ability to staff internally, you have to find those resources externally. One of the programs that we're exploring now is providing, incentivizing our current staff to become SPED certified. So as a district, we will train or pay for training for our teachers and also our paraeducators so that they could be certified in SPED so that our internal teachers could provide those services in lieu of hiring groups from outside. So we're exploring multiple options. But again, there's a cost to doing that as well because this is a new expense
we haven't had in the past. So that's kind of where we are.
Yeah, it is an expense that over time will save us money.
Staying within the topic itself, how does the percentage, not the number, but the percentage of special needs students keep increasing? If we are still failing to adequately identify students who need extra assistance, when does that number reach a steady state? Steady state, sorry.
So I think one of the areas that we have seen is we have seen an increase in our prevalence rate, and I think the state has as well. But I think one of the areas that we have really worked hard is our scientifically research-based intervention program that we have in our schools. We have interventionists at all of our K-8 schools. And part of that role is to provide intervention services that then could also help to better identify students who may need extra support with IEPs. And so that is something that we have seen over the last 4 years really has helped us to better identify students and provide the support that they need.
Thank you. Just really for a quick time check. So we have about 7 minutes in within the Q&A sections itself. I just wanted to keep everyone on time. So the next question is, will the budget for, this is now a school-specific question, will the budget for the 26-27 bring the 4 teachers lost from the 50-50 model back to Silvermine in the 4th and 5th grade?
So the schools, once they receive their budget, go through a process of kind of evaluating the priorities and the needs of the school. And so we'll be working closely with the school community this year to do exactly just that, to really elicit from the community what are the priorities and to think about what decisions we might need to revisit and what are the implications moving forward.
Great. Thank you so much. So going back to grants, since we cannot rely on federal grants, where can we turn our attention? State, local grants, local corporate sponsors, nonprofit that support education?
Yes, but it has to be available. The challenge is that, you know, a lot of federal funding impacts what's available at the state level too. So it becomes a catch-22. Dr. Estrella has formed strong partnerships. So we've been able to secure some philanthropic support. I think that that's an area where we continue to have those partnerships. And Dr. Estrella, along with Ralph Elancisi, meet regularly with our partners to demonstrate that their investment in us pays off and try to then form new partnerships, which is partly why we reinstated the CEP for our schools. It's tough to say what we would do instead because things are fluctuating so greatly in terms of the grants. There are not that many grants available. The grants that have been available sometimes will have fine print that says that if you, so we have a grant through Homeland Security that we were going to partner with NPD on. There's language in there that says that if you apply for this grant and you're awarded this grant, that you are then in line with how Homeland Security wants to protect our cities. And we don't know necessarily what that means for us. So we both pulled out of that grant. So sometimes you will start to go for a grant. There was a behavioral health one that was from Homeland Security that we started to pursue with Margaret Watt, who does a lot of good work for us. But then when we spiraled down into the grant, we saw again this language of having to agree to certain things that we hadn't had to agree to in grants prior. And so then it sort of makes us pause as to what are we opening ourselves up to if we start to take federal money. So I just want to show that there is, we've been particularly impacted in the grants department because prior, you would just apply for a grant and you would see it out there. And it just hasn't been that way more recently. And then the ones that are out there, people aren't really applying for them when they live in urban areas, to be quite honest with you. So those philanthropic partnerships are critical to us. Dr. Estrella, do you want to add to that?
So it's one, the fine print, and also the frequency in which opportunities have become available. In the past, it was very fluid and constantly available. Right now, the grant opportunities are very slim to none. We were very competitive and we had the opportunity to attain many grants for the district. Right now, when there are opportunities, they come with fine print, and also other opportunities are just very slim to come and very limited. So there's not much to come by and compete against.
Thank you so much. We have about 3 minutes to go. So this is, I think, Mr. Asmani, this is for you. Where can we find in the budget income from rentals of NPS properties? As an example, the bonus rented by a church, NECC rented by preschools.
I'll start to answer that, but I believe Ms. Fayos may have a more appropriate answer than me. I think two things. One is the rent that we get from that usually is used to offset the costs. So we will have, if you rent a gym for a private program, then we have to have a custodian there. We have to have security there. So in most instances, the buildings that we do rent break even. They don't generate significant revenues, and that's how we've managed those, Ms. Fayos.
Yeah, that is correct. We don't, because everybody that we typically rent to our community partners, these are Norwalk teams, Norwalk organizations, what we're charging them, it's just the cost to keep the building operational. So the security guard, if you require security, a custodian to open the doors, that's what they're paying for. We don't charge rent for like a space. Like if somebody needed a space, we would just tell them it costs on Saturday this much to have the space open. And we have that all outlined in our facilities department. And I believe you could find it online. If not, I'll definitely put it on there, which is what we give to sports teams or people when they're asking for space. But to call it rent, I think, is actually inaccurate. It's a fee, and it's to offset the fee of actually operating at that time.
Thank you. So there's one here. Please inform the audience of the following enrollment of the last 5 years. I'm not sure if you would have that information right now available.
I don't have it on me. It is information we have in the budget book that's online, but I don't have that.
Okay.
With me. But it's.
Okay. So the figures are here from Dr. Moore. So we're just going to clarify that once we have that on the website. I'm sorry.
Oh, the state numbers. Okay.
Correct, the state numbers. We just want to clarify that, and we'll make sure to update that and answer this on the budget website. Is that correct? Okay. So this is probably going to be the last question. So recently you sent out a parent survey over Parent Square that asked us if we could choose something to eliminate to save money, such as sports, band, and strings, and I'm not sure the other choice, but these items are non-negotiable. What other items would you be willing to eliminate that do not directly affect our students' ability to improve their school experience and quality of life?
So that was one of the questions that was in the other field, as you saw in that survey. The survey respondents agreed with the person that wrote that question. Sports, arts, enrichment were programs that are valued by the community. That was also a way for us to gauge the value of those communities, so that when we're making the argument for investing in these things, we can say that there's overwhelming support for these. Things that were mentioned that we could look at, I believe there were questions about transportation for choice programs. Those were things that came out in the survey. There were costs about non-classroom facing expenses. that were in there. There were costs related to professional development. Can professional development be provided in-house versus outside, and those types of things. So those are things that we would be looking at as we put together the budget.
So I want to thank the community for very thoughtful questions as we continue to think through and navigate the process. The next part of this evening is allowing you to have community conversations that will then give us some more insight as we continue to plan forward for the budget. For this piece, I'm going to ask people to move around in the room and sit with people that are not from their same schools or people that they know so that we can cross-pollinate the conversation. So before I give the next set of directions, I'm just going to ask if you could please cross-pollinate with people you normally don't engage with or don't have an affinity with. And
Dr.
the
Straya,
board,
I'm sorry, Dr. Straya, if I can just add. So a lot of the unanswered questions will be captured,
I'm gonna
but
put to them.
yeah, sorry.
And the board can join one of the groups at this point, as well as the cabinet. Thank you. Also, like union leaders, if you could take different tables and don't sit in the same table, so that way we can have cross-pollination around that. Okay. All right, so now that everyone is in cross-pollinated groups, I just ask that union leaders sit in different tables so that we can cross-pollinate you as well. I see multiple union leaders in one table. If you don't mind taking a different table. Mhm. Union leaders, are we going to cross-pollinate? Thank you. Okay. So these are the next steps that we're hoping to do through the conversation. We are going to allow approximately 30 minutes for these roundtable conversations. You had an opportunity this evening to listen and get some insight in terms of what were the overarching pieces of interest around the community based on the survey. Now I want to make sure that you have an opportunity Based on tonight's discussion and feedback around the survey and what you heard about prior budget experiences, some of the leverages that are leading into this budget, to start having a conversations about what are the things that are essential to you for us to know about and consider as we're thinking and planning for the 26-27 academic school year. And I'm going to ask to have somebody in your team that is kind of the chart note taker and start off by brainstorming just overarching elements of the budget that you want to keep top of mind. Once you go through your brainstorm, we're going to ask that you identify 3 components or leverages that you want us to keep in mind as your top 3 areas of most essential focus that you want us to consider as we're planning the budget. And we're asking that you work around this in community. And there's chart paper, there's markers on the table, there's members of the central office team that will be jotting notes so that not only are we capturing what you write on your chart paper, but also taking notes of the conversations that are happening so that we get a full scope of how you're thinking about the work ahead. And then after the 30 minutes, we're going to give each group approximately 2 minutes to present their 3 top areas of focus or things that you think are the most important things that we need to keep in mind as we continue to plan the budget forward, keeping in mind what was highlighted from the survey as well. Are we clear? Any questions? All right, so 30 minutes. Just doing a time check, we have less than 4 minutes. So if you have not identified your 3 areas of focus, please do so. Okay. When we're having fun, 30 minutes go by fairly quickly. If you could please wrap up your last thoughts. Just for the sake of being a little efficient, I'm just going to give table numbers so that we could just move along. So table 1, 2, Dr. Moore 3, 4, Ashley 5, and Sandra 6. Okay, we're going to start with and 7 in the middle. We're good? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Jasmine, you're 7. Yeah. Okay, we'll start with table 7.
Got you. Oh, I get a microphone. I really don't need a microphone, but I will take it. We've had a really lovely discussion. We have a couple parents and a couple board members at our table. And here are some of the values we decided to write down. We think class size is vastly important. Um, One of us experienced a large increase in class sizes and therefore also has experienced less services for their child and more behavioral issues in the classroom and burnout from or the communication of burnout from their teacher. So in terms of teacher retention and happy children that can successfully learn, we think it's important to keep our class sizes on the smaller side wherever possible. And then our other two things were music and arts education. We think it is vitally important. We are very proud of Norwalk's heritage as a proud marching band school, right? Off to Dayton soon. Is that right? Competing. So music and arts is important across the board, and we know how flexible that can make children's development as they continue to learn. And then health, but we really discussed what health means. So we thought about physical health in terms of physical education, food services, and security that protect our children's physical health and also their social, emotional, and mental health, which is our paraprofessionals and our extra support staff and our social workers. And yeah, so staff seems to be vitally important. We know it's already 85% of your budget, and we think it should remain the top line item of your budget.
Thank you
Anything
so
I
much.
missed, table 7?
Thank you. Table 3. It should be.
All right, so by the way, this is Jan and Richard, and they are new to the Common Council. From District D, so congratulations. So we were talking about what we value, what we want to put forward. Obviously, we hovered around that category, community priorities. We believe that there should be district-wide minimum standards for every classroom. Along with that, we need to see more boots on the ground, so to speak, in their classrooms. That means teachers, paras, RBTs, bus riders. We believe in a reduction in the class size. We want to see tutors. We want to see interventionists. So our big push, minimum standards for every classroom, as well as making certain we have teachers and other supports in the classrooms. Then our next priority was greater communication, clarity, and timely from central office to principals, to staff, to the community at large, and parents. And I think with all of the meetings last spring, we heard a lot from the parents about clear and open and greater communication. And then our third is understanding and managing costs as they relate to the administrative costs in the district.
Thank you so much for sharing. Table 4.
Hi. And if I miss anything, table 4, please let me know. So the bulleted points that we agreed that we valued the most, teacher and school input earlier in the budget process, talking about how last cycle and recently in our experience, in my experience, in our experience, that there's been a disjointed piece of parents' opinions, but we never actually get to hear directly from the teachers, whereas those people are the ones that are with our students all the time. And from a day-to-day perspective, if there's an issue, we go directly to the teachers. So why is their opinion not injected into the conversation simultaneously with the parents? I would love to see their opinions heard and amplified, and then coming together with the parents and community's needs. Then I think that that would be a path to success. We agreed. Something else that we valued as a group was the maintaining the school food program. A lot of the students in our diverse community rely on this program for food every single day. And we're really, really lucky that we got a private funder to come in and swoop and save the program along with matched funds from the city. But it's not guaranteed. So that's something that we think is really important, because a hungry kid is not a kid that can learn or thrive or be social as well as someone who has a full stomach. And it's something that I think that should be, we believe should be prioritized for the health and wellness. And I think loops into mental health as well, that the first table was talking about. We also talked about presenting a quote unquote realistic budget instead of a wishful budget, almost operating in the beginning in a worst case scenario, instead of scraping for funds that might not ever come or might not be realistic, and then having to make hard choices on the back end when starting in a more conservative place might help in some way. And then also something that was discussed was, as a possible helpful part of the process, is streamlining school choice transportation. For example, 3 different students going to 3 different middle schools, or the same middle school having 3 different buses going down the same street. And if it's not, that can't be the most efficient way to use funds, and re-examining that. And it would probably take a lot of logistical gymnastics to really figure out how to get all these students to these different schools, which is an opportunity that our community is offered for school choice. But perhaps there is some savings there for streamlining that process. I think that.
Thank you. Table 1? Table 1? Table 1 is working.
Okay, good evening. Here at Table 1, one of the first things we talked about, wanted to really focus on, was being transparent. When we speak on that, on being transparent, we looked at it from a budget standpoint. We also looked at it from the education standpoint to the public. And also, whenever, one of the biggest things as far as our public is concerned, if they're coming in and we here may understand what's being spoken about, but when the public comes in, they're not understanding what we're basically saying. So it's more or less being clear to them and being fair that they can understand and relate to what's being said. Because of that, it gives them the opportunity to walk out here and being free, not walking out subject to not understanding what we spoke of. Also, when it comes to information, we also talked about the timeliness and response. It's very important that, you be able to respond in a timely manner. And one of the things that when you overall, some of the concerns they were talking about when you talk about transparent, it wasn't clear to them. And we hearing that time and time again. So that piece is very important. Number 2 was the being effective review. And one of the main things we wanted to do and look at it from a budget standpoint, we wanted to make some changes and see exactly making changes and looking at from a program standpoint. not only from a program, looking at it from a policy standpoint. What are some of the things that we can do to change some of these policies that would be beneficial? Not saying the policy itself is not being beneficial, but look at the opportunity to make some changes because of the fact that there's things that's happening and there's things that's going on. And as time increased, it's going to get worse. It's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. So we were looking at the policy standpoint, and then we added in the transportation. We talked about that as well because of the cost of the transportation throughout, especially when you're talking about the high school level and when you talk about the sports itself. That is very expensive. So we also, looked at, hey, from a kids that's in high school, there's bus passes. We can save money. You may look into that opportunity and look at saving some type of cost from the bus pass. Even from a recreational standpoint, I know when I was coaching at West Hill and Stanford High, both schools had their own bus. And the staff, the security staff, was certified. So they were able to transport us to wherever school we were going to. That's also an opportunity to look at as well, to cut costs as well. Everything's going to count. Then the last thing we talked about was community partnership. And we're speaking about community partnership, we're speaking about fundraising, sponsorship, donations, working within the community itself. You got, Wegman, they're a new facility that moved into Norwalk. That's a window of opportunity. And if it means for them, as far as donating food, then that's okay as well. But when you talk about sponsorship, our sports schools and our sports programs, hey, they have stadiums, they have gymnasium. One of the main things that I did at West Hill was I went out and got sponsorship as far as banners are concerned. And those sponsorship overall and the money that went towards the sports programs, not just a basketball program. It went towards a sports program. So you got to be able to open up. So because of the way things are going on nowadays and the changes is happening, hey, this may be the opportunity for us to look at what's going to be available and what way to go about to cut the costs. But we're going to have to do better than what we need to do to make things a lot easier for ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Table 2.
Gotcha, Rob. Who's gonna, okay, Marcus.
Hi, everybody. So at our table, we talked about a few different things. One of the things we've started talking about, and if I miss anything, please feel free to jump in. But streamlining, how do we partner with the corporations in the community? So that one school who might have a partnership, for example, with Stu Leonard's is not the only school that benefits from that partnership, but that we could streamline a way for all schools to be able to benefit from any kind of partnerships. We talked about retaining staff and compensating them. That's a bit more challenging than just saying it as a slogan. One of the main things we focused on was the specialized programs that we do not want to lose. Not only did we speak about the sports, the arts, and what was the third one? And enrichment, but we also dove into special needs and how to retain how to best service the special needs population. We did mention possibly getting more in Gillingham trained staff, not only at the classroom level, but at higher levels so that we could prevent students from reaching into special education. We talked about the need to have school choice still. Many families really, I guess, enjoy having school choice, being a science school or being an art school. Am I missing anything here, guys? Because I know we spoke about so much. We were all over the place. I don't want to miss anything. We talked a bit about Joe's farm too, though, so. Yeah, Joe has a beautiful farm. Yeah. And we want to create more Joe farms. We want to make it spread it out so that, yeah. But basically, trying to make sure that the kids who need the most are the ones who are not the ones who are getting cut short at the end of it all. It's a challenge, but with all of us here, with our thoughts, I think we could get closer to the goal.
Thank you. Ashley? the group?
Okay, so a lot of what we talked about was mentioned by all the other tables. But the first thing, we're looking at feedback and things that we value, and one of those is revenue. So this year, if we're going back into a situation where the costs are rising at a really high rate, and we see that we could be going towards a budget crisis, what can we do right now to start looking for other avenues of revenue? How can we start talking with the state? How can we start talking with Norwalk and figuring out, if it's taxes, if it's working with businesses, sponsorships, whatever it may be, to upfront right now figure out how to get the funding. We did not feel optimistic about ECS funding at our table, and we did not feel super optimistic about grants with what's going on at the federal government. So the second one we had is ways to differentiate instruction. So, we talked about we're doing such a great job reducing this achievement gap and making sure that all students are getting what they need, but how do we keep making sure that continues? So we talked about the coaches, the interventionists. It was brought up a lot last night where people had them come up and said, this is why we're doing so well at the schools. And I know last year we were in jeopardy of losing them, so we felt it was strong to keep those coaches and interventionists. The gifted and talented program, it was brought up that that's something that Norwalk has that differentiates us from some of the other districts. So making sure that we keep that. The music and the art, which I think we've heard from the community at whole, so I'm not going to go too much into that. And SPED services. I know legally we have to have the SPED services, but how do we continue these wonderful programs that we're building in the district? And I know that in long term, right, we're saying they'll save costs, but how do we keep building them now with all the cost restrictions? And then the last thing we had, which has been brought up by almost everyone, is just the efficiencies. We talked a lot about transportation, especially with the choice program. We love the choice program. No one had any negative feedback on that, but more so if these buses have 6, 7, 8 kids on them and they're going across the whole district and every area is going to different schools, I guess policy might be a way to look at it, or is there a way that we can charge a small cost? Is there a way that we can restructure the busing? What can we do? Because it seems like if transportation's already going up $12 million, there has to be a better solution, because that's just too big of a number to go into next year. So I think that covers it. Anything else from the table? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, table 6.
I just want to refer back to it. At this table, majority of the parents, I believe, had younger children, so we talked about a lot of things that affect elementary schools. To summarize, we talked about arts and language and class size. It all boils down to protecting the specialized programs in each respective school. In an ideal world, it's nice to be able to offer everything at every school, whether it's strings and bands and music and athletics and so forth. But when you have schools that are specialized, those programs have to be prioritized. So, for example, the Marine Science program or the Global Studies program or the PTAC or the dual language at Silvermine, those programs need to be prioritized in those specific buildings, and each of those programs is going to have some minimum requirements that need to be made sure to include in the overall budget. The other parts that we talk about, similar to others, class size is of course important. Something that I personally learned tonight was that accelerated gifted and talented programs are included in the special education budget. A lot of people talk about special education thinking it's a remedial program, but it's not necessarily. I think in terms of budget presentations, it would be nice to know to see those parts split up. So you can see how much of the special education budget is going to remedial and how much is going into gifted and talented and accelerated programs. And I think it puts a different perspective on when you talk about deficiencies and gaps in achievement. So preserving those services and mental health support, which I think has been addressed by other tables already.
Thank you. So I want to thank all the groups for engaging in a really robust conversation. As I walked around the space, there was so much insight that was provided in terms of the things that we need to think of and prioritize as we continue to plan forward for the budget. I want to thank members of the board for being here and mingling in the conversation so that you have some insight as well in terms as the planning forward of the budget and the things that we need to prioritize and think of. The chart papers that have the notes, we would love to keep them so that we can gather those notes as well as the notes that each individual member of the cabinet is gathering or gathered during the conversation. I want to thank all of you for being here and providing us insight as we continue to plan forward. We're looking to having other conversations with other constituents in the community, like our school leaders. We'll figure out a way to include teachers because we have so many, but we could even conduct a survey to gather feedback. So we will continue to solicit feedback from our community to see what are the things that we as a whole want to prioritize as we plan forward. Obviously, we might not be able to attain all of the things that we want, but it's important for us to know what are those key things that we all value deeply that we want to continue to have within our schools. So again, thank you for this initial. We will have other conversations, it might not necessarily be in a town hall format, but we have a number of other engagements like the workshop where we will provide more insight in terms of the planning forward of the budget. If there is additional information that we need to deliberate on and there's a need to have another one, we're more than open to do that. We just have to look at the schedule and see where we could fit in another conversation because we have conversations coming up with SGC PTA leadership as well and a number of other constituents to gather feedback. I just ask that you pay close attention to Parent Square because we will be sending out information about board meetings where additional conversations will be happening. In December, we will have the budget workshop that will provide a lot of context in terms of the thinking behind the budget. And basically every board meeting in December will be very focused on the 26-27 budget. But we will be providing information through Parent Square to families to keep you updated around future conversations and other pieces of feedback that we're hoping to gather from you and other members of the community, if that's helpful. And the questions that were not answered today, we will answer them and place them on the link in our website that's focused around the budget. So if you want to refer back to that component, and we'll link it to Parent Square so that you know when it's updated so that you can have access to it and look into it and also share it with other families across the district so that they also are aware of what's happening. But once again, thank you for being here this evening. I know it's not easy to, thank you for being here this evening and joining us and providing us this feedback. And we look forward to having this ongoing dialogue as we continue to plan the FY 2026-27 budget. And as we hear more from the federal government, I don't know if you have been following, but there is this week, there's been a lot of dismantling of the Department of Education, and we still don't know the implications of a lot of these shifts and how they will impact federal funding. So please stay very tuned in to what's happening at the federal level, because what's happening at the federal level will have a significant impact in our budget cycle as well. 30% of our budget are grants, and a lot of these grants are federally funded grants. So it's really important that we stay tuned to what's happening at the federal level too, because it's not just the local component, it's also the federal component that is going to potentially impact what our budget looks like for 26-27. So we look forward to partnering with you. And this process is not easy, and what's happening nationally doesn't make this process any better. But we will work with you to do the best possible job under the circumstances that we're in. And onward and upward, we'll make the best of this, and we will continue to advocate at every possible level to find additional resources to better educate our students. Thank you for your time. I know it's not easy coming from work here, and I know people have a lot of things to do, so we really appreciate you. Have a great evening, and if I don't see you, happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy your time with your family.